Hi there, it's Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder here with an update to the Sultai ramp deck that I've been running to Mythic, and I actually did it a lot quicker this time around. Actually cruised through Diamond. I think it just took me 2 days of dailies to go through Diamond. Yesterday I went on a 12-0 run with the deck. Today was a little bit more frustrating, but got some of the matchups that I wanted, as well as got pretty lucky versus some mono red matchups. And so I am now Mythic. I calibrated at number 121, and since have dropped 6 spots. That's been a couple hours. That's pretty typical of the decay. When more points are in the system, then people will begin to pass you up. So it means that I was pretty strong through the Platinum and Diamond, and I did it in pretty decent time to get calibrated at 121, which means it's a strong deck. It means I've been playing against strong opponents, and very impressed with how this deck works. The TLDR of this deck is that the 2 MVPs are sideboard cards. That's why I think you should be playing best of 3. Magic was not designed or balanced for best of 1. If you're playing best of 1, then have fun playing against Embercleave all day long, because there really is no answers in right now in Magic where you want to be running a mainboard card versus Embercleave. So that's where the sideboard cards come in, and that's why I think Aether Gust is the MVP and Thought Distortion would be the other MVP, because they take 2 bad matchups in best of 1, blue-white control and mono-red, and turn them into reasonable matchups, at least for the red matchup, and then turns it into a phenomenal matchup. In fact, I'm making a compilation video of U-white control decks getting destroyed by Thought Distortion. So let's go ahead and take a look at the deck. This is my Sultai ramp deck, the current list. I've showcased this many times on the channel before, but there have been quite a few additions and subtractions. The first thing you'll notice is there's no Nissa. Nissa is completely gone out of this list. Nissa felt like a win more card. I did like Nissa in the blue-white control matchup, but that's about it. That's the only matchup that I did like Nissa. Every other matchup, I'd end up cutting Nissa. Nissa you'd think would be good against like red or Gruul or other Simic decks like matchups, or Wilderness Reclamation. It's actually not. It's one of the worst cards in the deck right now in the current meta, because the meta, you need to either stabilize versus fast decks, or you need to outgrind control decks. And Nissa doesn't do very well against the Elspeth, Elspeth Saga, that exiles a converted mana cost 3 or greater card. They're going to outvalue there. And the only other combo with Nissa is really like dumping a ton of mana into like a Hydroid Krasis, or being able to chain off 2 spells in 1 turn. And in this meta, that's not that big of a deal. So I've cut Nissa completely. The other thing that I've done is I've decided to go more of the Wolfwillow Haven route than the Paradise Druid route. Paradise Druid is a bit of an issue right now with a lot of Teferis, and that doesn't seem... You'd think that the Paradise Druid would do better against Teferi than Wolfwillow Haven. And I actually prefer Wolfwillow Haven, because the Teferi players, for whatever reason, don't seem to be balancing the Wolfwillow Haven as much. Paradise Druid also will die to a lot of the board wipes that are out there. So Wolfwillow Haven just does a better job at ramping than the Paradise Druid. And especially sideboard too, when you're bringing in board wipes, you don't have to board wipe your own ramp spell, which is a better feeling than having to kill your own Paradise Druid. A lot of times what you're going to be doing is you're going to be ramping for like a Fine Finality or a Ritual of Soot, and I mean, you really have to blow those quick, like turn 3, turn 4, and then if you're going the Paradise Druid ramp route, then you end up having to kill your Paradise Druid. So I don't like that. I'd rather go like a split with Wolfwillow Haven. I still like the Paradise Druid for the mana fixing, as the Wolfwillow Haven only does give just green. So this other ability of sacrificing the wolves, that actually does come into play every now and again. I've been able to feed my graveyard to recast Polukranos or Euros, or just the 2/2 beaters. Being able to sacrifice it is something that's legit in this deck. So don't forget about that aspect of the Wolfwillow Haven. That's a neat little thing that you can do, is turn it into a 2/2 wolf later on when you no longer need the mana. One of the biggest additions to the deck is a 1 of Fine Finality. I can't stress how well this card is performed. Now, I wouldn't suggest going up to more than just 1 Fine Finality, because you usually just need 1 of them. But what I like about this card is it's not dead in any matchup against control. Using a Fine to get back 2 Hydroid Krasis is not that terrible of a card. And of course, Finality against Gruul and Red is is super good, giving all creatures -4/-4. This is also pretty good versus the Annex, because it actually does reduce its power as well as its toughness. Therefore, when it goes to the graveyard, it will actually read that it will only get 1 satyr back rather than 2 satyrs. So that's nice about Finality. That actually is very relevant in that matchup. And this card is killing most of the creatures you want it to kill. Unfortunately, it does not kill Dream Trawler, which is an issue. So the ramp is pretty much the same as far as the Growth Spiral and Euro. Euro I was up to a 4 of, then down to a 2 of, then I think 3 is the right slot. Growth Spiral, of course, is the best card in the deck, because it's ramping you to get the bigger spells, and it's the easiest way to do so. It's also filling up your graveyard for Euros and the Polukranos being recast from the graveyard. So 4-3 split is pretty good with these cards. Then we have Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths. It's another one I've added just as an additional Tamiyo target or Finality target. This is going to give you a 3/2 chump blocker. It's going to trade with the Bonecrusher Giants. And it's also going to be pretty good versus like Nissa, or excuse me, pretty good versus Teferi and Narset in the blue-white control matchup, as they'll usually will have a 0/4 wall out, but not 2 of them, so the menace can actually get through. So I do like Atris, Oracle of Half-Truths. It's going to fill up your graveyard. It's going to dig you for the cards that you want. So I like the card a lot. Deathsprout still in here as a 3 of. Really good versus Embercleave. Very good versus even, it's not a bad card in match number 1 versus Dream Trawler. I do end up taking it out versus Blue Eye Control, but the Deathsprout does allow you to at least tap down at instant speed. So I usually do it on your opponent's upkeep. I tap down their Death Trawler or their Dream Trawler so that it can't attack and get another card, and they have to actually discard a card to give it hexproof that turn. So I do like these. It ramps you towards Casualties of Wars or up to a higher drop, like a bigger Hydroid Krasis the next turn. So 3 of is the right number. Polukranos, this card absolutely has deserved its spot in the 60, as it's great versus red. It's great versus Gruul. It's not bad versus like Dream Trawlers for the blue-white matchup. There are very few matchups that actually cut this. I think Wilderness Reclamation would be one of them that I cut this card. But it's really solid as a 1 of. I wouldn't suggest running a bunch of these. There is one terrible interaction with Polukranos, which is Bonecrusher Giant. Bonecrusher Giant will actually do 4 damage to Polukranos, as it says damage cannot be prevented, and then remove that many counters. So it actually does the damage and the removal of counters. And so you got to keep that in mind. It can actually kill that Polukranos pretty easy with the Bonecrusher Giant added with some other effect. The Tamiyo is something that I think added numbers since the last time that I've done a deck tech of this. Tamiyo is insanely good in the deck, as Tamiyo is going to be both filling up your graveyard for Euro as well as Polukranos, and it is going to be able to recast those Casualty of Wars and all the other cards you want to recast. Cavalier is another like flex spot in this deck. I like it as a 1 of. It's another target for Finality. It's another way to fill up your graveyard for Euros. It's another way to ramp to be able to chain off a big Hydroid Krasis. So I do like Cavalier. Another addition is Ashiok. So gone more of like the good stuff Planeswalker route here. Ashiok is super good in certain matchups and is never bad as a 1 of. Can be a finisher. I've actually, against like Wilderness Reclamation and Blue Eye Control, sometimes you're really, really grindy and it will come down to milling, and you're milling yourself a ton, so you need to get above what your opponents are doing. And those 2/3s actually add up if they attack in just a couple times. That's a bunch of cards that are going to be exiled. The -3s is super relevant too in the blue-white, because you can get like a Banishing Light back that's on a card and then get some more value. Like a very typical thing is Tamiyo will get banished, and then you return it with Ashiok, and yes, they do get their Banishing Light back, but then you get to activate your Tamiyo, and then they have to decide if they want to go after Ashiok or Tamiyo at that point. Liliana has been the latest addition to this deck. This is really in here for Dream Trawler. That card is annoying. You have to be able to kill Dream Trawler. A lot of times they'll tap out versus you, especially on game number 1 before you bring in your sideboard. And so if they tap out for Dream Trawler, you can negative Liliana to take care of Dream Trawler. Last but not least are the 2 cards that are the reason to be going ramp in the format. The first one is Casualty of Wars. and the second one is Hydroid Krasis. Casual Wars oftentimes can be a 5-for-1. You can kill Banishing Lights. You can kill... And there are plenty of decks like Mono Black that will have an enchantment creature and a creature, or food against the Jund Food. I've been able to hit all the abilities with the Trail of Crumbs, the Witch's Oven, a creature, a land, and one of their Planeswalkers. They have Vraska out. So Casual Wars is super good in the format. It's the whole point to running the deck. And Hydroid Krasis is still really good. It's a great card to stabilize versus aggro decks. It's a great card to outdraw control decks. The mana base is pretty much the same here. I think that I have decided to go up on the Temple of Mysteries over the Temple of Deceit because the green is more important right now than the blue or black. So going to go the Temple of Malady as a 2 of, and the Temple of Mystery as a 4 of, and 2 of Temple of Deceit. I've thought about just going a full package of Temple of Maladies and Mysteries, but the Deceit is nice and flexible right now. You need double blue for Euro. You need double black for Casualties of Wars. You're going to have plenty of other green sources from the rest of these cards. So pretty straightforward with the 28 lands. You'll flood a lot. You'll get frustrated with MTG Arena drawing every land in your deck with 20 cards left in your deck. That happens, but this deck's very efficient at going through its land and utilizing any sort of excess lands. Let's go on to the sideboard. Sideboard has remained relatively the same because you can't cut a lot of these cards. I would love to add another Cry of the Carnarium in this deck, but there just is not room, and you do need Ritual of Soot for a different matchup. So Ritual of Soot is very necessary for the Gruul matchup, as it's going to kill all of the 5/5 Lovestruck Beasts. It's also pretty decent versus food. It's going to kill most of their cards. But I do prefer Cry of the Carnarium in most of the other aggro matchups because red, this is going to get rid of their board a turn earlier. It's going to get rid of Phoenixes for good if they're cast from the hand. And it's also going to get rid of like Witch's Ovens or the Cauldron Familiars, so they can't come back, which is pretty good versus a food matchup. So I have a 1-1 split right now. I just wish I had more room, but you can't enter the God Eternals because this is going to be the card that's going to save you versus red. So oftentimes with the Growth Spiral or Paradise Druid, you're going to be able to get this out a turn earlier. Turn 4 is going to be the turn that they're going to be looking to really punish you. And if you can kill a creature and put out a 4/4 and gain 4 life, that is going to be the difference of stabilizing and not. It's kind of our Siege Rhino in this particular matchup. It's going to get us pretty far ahead in that matchup. And with like Tamiyo getting back into the God Eternals, it's going to be. It also does fill up your graveyard for Euro. So I've actually gone like turn 3 Euro. Ramped in a land and gain 3 life. Red deck swings in, and then next turn you have Enter the God Eternals, killing a creature. They're usually like a Runaway Steamkin or one of their better cards, and then getting a 4/4 blocker as well as gaining 4 life. And then the next turn, getting Euro out, gaining another 3 life, and drawing another card. And at that point, you've stabilized pretty well. So I do like this card. Against that matchup specifically, it's still one of the most common matchups you'll go up against. It's not a bad card versus the other aggro strategies like Gruul Adventures or it's just Gruul aggro. It's going to kill most of the creatures out of that list. Cards like the Questing Beast will die to Enter the God Eternals. So this is another card that I think is very worthwhile putting a 3 of in the deck. Aether Gust and Mystical Dispute, you can't cut these. These are going to turn specific matchups into your favor. So Wilderness Reclamation, both these cards will come in, Aether Gust and Mystical Dispute, because you'll be countering their cards and bouncing their cards or at least making them recast their cards. Aether Gust is good versus Gruul. It's insanely good versus red with the Embercleave. It's going to be your stabilizing card versus Embercleave. It's going to turn that matchup into a very unfavorable matchup to about a 50-50 matchup. Which is good. You can take your worst matchup into a 50-50 matchup is exactly what you want to be doing in a meta. Mystical Dispute is also going to give you the upper hand versus any sort of other blue decks that are out there like Esper Dance or Esper Control, Blue-White Control, ramp decks, so green-blue ramp decks. Anything you need to interact with a 1-mana counterspell, Mystical Dispute is going to come in versus those matchups. Last but definitely not least, like I said, the MVP that's just actually absolutely tearing up the Mythic and Diamond leagues because there is so much blue-white control, and I think there's so much blue-white control because it has a favorable matchup versus red. Thought Distortion is a boss in this format. Wilderness Reclamation, I'll bring it in. U-White Control, I'll bring it in. Dance of Mance, it will just end the game versus them. They'll have no threats after a Thought Distortion. Black-White Enchantments has a Graveyard Recursion type strategy as well. Thought Distortion is great versus that. Basically, they can't counter it. It'll rip their hand and graveyard to pieces. and it's going to be GG after that. So like I said, I've got a video compilation of hitting Thought Distortion for 7. I've been ripping blue-white control players' hands completely out, like 3 absorbs gone. It also gets rid of their graveyard, which is actually relevant with the Elspeth Conquers Death saga, as well as like I said, with the Esper Dance, being able to bring those cards back. And they're really at that point going to struggle to come back if you do land a Thought Distortion. I would love to put a 3rd Thought Distortion in here, but there just is not room in the sideboard to be able to adequately throw this in and not really suffer from the rest of the matchups. You'll only need to see 1. Your deck's pretty good at digging for that 1. Tamiyo's pretty good in those matchups too, if you need to cast it again to getting it back from your graveyard, but usually 1 is sufficient. It's another card I want to test out in like Pioneer and Modern to see if it's actually playable there in specific matchups, because yes, 6 mana is steep, but man, this card is killer when it hits. So anyway, there is the overall deck tech. Again, I don't have time today. We're going to be starting our FNM here in 20 minutes, so I don't have time to do some gameplay for you. But I definitely wanted to showcase this since I did hit Mythic today. The deck is still fire. It is still great in the meta. I'm liking Standard because, I mean, I've been able to toy around with this deck. There isn't like a specific list that seems to work at these lists are for specific times against specific decks that I'm seeing a lot of, and I get to tune it as needed. There have been a lot of changes. I wish I could have kept track of like a history of cards that came in and out. But that's what I like Standard. I like formats where you can tinker with. I just don't like playing the best 60 and these are the best 60 and there's no room for adjustment and this is the best deck or there's 3 decks that are playable. Right now there really is like, I would say 5 decks that you're going to see a lot of. You're going to see a lot of the Blue-White Control, Mono Red, Wilderness Reclamation, Gruul, and then I would say some sort of Simic Ramp or deck. You're going to see those like crazy. Fires of Invention, not so much anymore, but still, comparatively to standards of the past, this is a pretty diverse standard. There's plenty of different options in decks. You'll still see like blue-green flash every now and again. You'll see like Big Red. Big Red's actually pretty popular. Mono Black Devotion, Jund Food, Black Red Discard, Knights, whether it be 3-color Knights or 2-color Knights, Rakdos Knights or Mardu Knights. It's still, you're still going to see these decks every now and again. Planeswalker fires, regular fires. So it's a pretty diverse meta. There are a lot of decks that can have the option of doing well. Anyway, there's been my deck tech for the day. Again, we'll try to do some gameplay, as I'm probably done with Mythic for a while because there's no point to really grinding above the 100 mark. I don't know how much I'll decay, but I am qualified for this one coming up, and if I stay at this, oh wow, we dropped 3 ratings while doing this deck tech. If I stay, though, in the top 1,000 with this deck, I'll qualify for the next one. So I'll probably record the Mythic qualifiers. I don't know if I'll commentate while playing, but I'll probably record it to see how I do. Hopefully I can go far with this deck and actually get qualification. Been a while since I've played competitively. This is, it's fun to play again at this high level play. I still don't like playing it on Arena. Arena still, to me, is a terrible format to play competitive Magic on because the shuffler is not a shuffler. I don't care what anyone's saying. I've played enough to tell you that the runs happen way more than they should, and the floods and the starves. There are so many times it's going to give you 2 lands. 2 lands, 2 lands, 2 lands. Like your opening hand has like the... And that's why I like this deck, because you can Growth Spiral or Temple out of it. Whereas if you play any other controller or bigger deck, a lot of times you'll keep your 2 land because you'll have like an Opt or something, and then you'll get Starve, and then flooded, majorly flooded about 20 cards down. You'll start hitting all of your land drops, and it seems that it happens way too often than not. Or there seems to be something weird with the converted mana cost in the shuffler too, like that it wants to give you a kind of diverse group of converted mana costs. Red has an Embercleave in their hand way too often. It's like almost every, statistically speaking, with a 4 in your deck, you should have Embercleave more often than not. But it is just too often that they just have the 1 Embercleave, not 2, not 3, not 4, just the 1 Embercleave in their opening hand and do that turn 4 kill. And it's just annoying. It's obnoxious. I don't see this kind of disparity in like paper or even on MTGO. So we've already caught them in the past of admitting that their shuffler is not true random because they do want to make mulligans not happen as often as they should. and that's why they kind of skew those lands in the opening hand and kind of skew those different converted mana costs. So anyway, I'm sure they'll call me conspiracy theorist for saying that, but people have crunched the numbers. I've seen spreadsheets, I've seen stuff that is statistically improbable for these things to happen. Not impossible, but improbable. And I tend to agree with these analysis. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.